to have our Region 12 meeting. My name is Nefi Garza, and it is a pleasure for me to be here amongst all of you. Let's call this meeting to order. Kendall, if you could do roll call, please.
Yes, sir. Brian Yanta.
Present.
I can't hear you, but I see you, so I'll count you. Thank you. Dave Wegman. Derek Bays.
Here.
Thank you. Doris Cooksey. Debbie Reed.
Here.
Thank you. Nefi Garza.
Present.
Thank you. Kara Tackett.
Present.
Thank you. Jeffrey Carroll.
Here.
I see you, but I can't hear you. So thank you. John Beasley. Suzanne Scott.
Here.
Thank you. Steve Gonzalez.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Dave Mock.
Here.
Thank you. And Steve, Darren, are you on for Steve? I'm working on it.
No, I'm not.
Darren, was that a yes?
No, I no longer work at SAWS, so no, I'm not representing Steve today.
Okay, thank you. Chair, we have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Oh, that's right. He doesn't. All right. We'll go on to agenda item number 2, which is public comment. Let me remind everybody it's a limit of 3 minutes per person. We always have an opportunity to speak at the beginning of the agenda as well as at the end. Kendall, is there anybody that has signed up to speak?
No, sir, no public comments.
Very well. We'll move on to agenda item number 3, which is the approval of the minutes from the previous San Antonio Regional Flood Planning Group meeting for Region 12. For those that are present, they are attached. I believe those that are online, they were previously emailed to you. I'll entertain a motion for approval of the minutes from the previous Region 12 meeting.
So moved.
I'll second.
Doris, a second. Approve. You receive approval. All in favor, please vote. Say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 4, which is communication from the Texas Water Development Board. I believe Anita's on the call. I thought I saw her name. Anita,
Hello, everyone.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you. Let me turn the time over to you for any updates.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. So I just have a few updates. The first, once the contract amendment is executed for the region, I just want to give a reminder to submit the executed subcontract amendment and other required info. We sent an email from our flood planning team on March 16th. Please review that and get me that subcontract amendment at your earliest convenience. Next, I just want to remind everyone to please see our last newsletter that was sent out in March. We also sent out an email blast about FMX voting, as well as the draft plan 60-day comment period. If you all have any other questions about it or would like me to resend that to you all, just let me or Kendall know and I can get that to you all. That's it.
Is there any questions that anybody from the committee that it may have for Anita or from anybody else from the water board? Debbie, anything?
No.
Kara, you good? Derek? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 5, which is the chair report. I do have a couple of items to report for the group. I think it's appropriate. I'm going to take the liberty to give you an update on the City of San Antonio's bond thanks to our citizens, we did receive approval, overwhelming approval for our bond for 2022. Interestingly enough, an interesting side note, the drainage piece, or Proposition 2, I believe, did receive the highest voter approval, even above that of streets, which is kind of an accomplishment. It's amazing. It was amazing to see that. I think it had a lot to do with the public outreach, the component that I think the committee did an amazing job in helping us with that. Resulting from that success, the committee, as I mentioned to you guys at the last meeting, that the committee had proposed the development of a standing drainage committee that would have an opportunity to review all of the city of San Antonio's drainage projects, understand the master plans, understand their phasing, and even potentially even propose additional projects. That recommendation by the Drainage Bond Committee was submitted to council, two council members, Castillo and Sandoval did provide something that we know as a CCR, which is basically a city council consideration request or something. I forget what the second C is, but it is basically a request to do some kind of action. And in this case was to form a drainage committee. The reason why I bring this up specifically for this forum is because the largest city in our region will now have a citizens group that will be charged with reviewing all of the city of San Antonio's projects and help us prioritize it. As yesterday, I presented to the governance committee the city of San Antonio's proposal to take this suggested committee and formalize it. This did differ a little bit from what the council office originally requested, but just a real quick highlight, it will be a group. It will be actually 4 committees. It will be a steering committee and 3 subcommittees. The 3 subcommittees will represent different regions or watersheds. One committee will be the Salado Creek. It would be the Salado and the Cibolo Creek. In the case of the city, we touched the Cibolo Creek a little bit. So we will have a committee for that. We'll have a committee for the Olmos and San Antonio watersheds, which is the center area of the city. And then we'll have another committee of the Leon Creek and Medina River. That'll be another subcommittee. Those 3 subcommittees will be composed of individuals appointed by council. And then representatives from each of those will sit on a steering committee. Now, each of those 4 drainage committees will have representation from the public as appointed by the council, as well as a representation from the development community. Now you'll say, well, why do we want the development community? I have always said that the development community, especially the engineers in the development community, are somewhat of my first line of defense. When a developer comes to the city and they want to develop something, it's the developer engineer that will say, this is what's acceptable in the city and this is what the city requires. So it's important for us at the city to have a good relationship with the development community and educate them, because ultimately they're the ones that are building new infrastructure for a lot of the work that we do. So they will be there. We will have representatives, and we will be reaching out to the real estate council and so forth to have representation in each of those 4 committees, as well as representation from environmental groups, because in everything that we're doing, we do have a desire and an interest to increase our nature-based designs, something that this committee has expressed interest. City of San Antonio, we also want to include that as a part of that. So we will have representations from environmental groups on all 4 of those drainage committees. Don't ask me how they're going to get appointed. We're still going to work that out. I don't know yet. But at the end of the day, the hope is that we will have this standing committee that will review our projects, that will ultimately come to this group for consideration into our plans. Any questions that you guys may have on the bond or this standing drainage committee that I just mentioned.
Neffy, I'll just say, both Debbie and I were there yesterday when you did the presentation. You did an excellent job. And I think that the support that you got from the council was very encouraging. And I think that it shows that how important the continual public input is into, addressing flooding and drainage in our community. So I'm happy that the recommendation from the bond committee went forward and it's getting such good support from the council. And I appreciate your advocacy as well.
Neffy, one of the things in the original CCR was if someone does work for the city, they can't participate in a committee. Is that still going to be a standing? Did that change?
Thank you for bringing that up. One of the original request was that in the original CCR, it did prohibit anybody that was doing any engineering work for either the city, the county, or the river authority to be a part of this committee. After much discussion with council and explaining to them that there would not be a conflict of interest because this drainage committee would be an advisory committee, not a decision-making committee, they agreed that requirement would be removed. And I explained to them, I really need engineers. Now, the whole thing's not going to be all engineers, but I do need some of them sitting on that committee. So they did agree to remove that requirement on there. So. I'm sorry, I thought you had a question. Your light turned on. That's why I thought you had a question.
No questions,
Okay.
but just thank you for what you were able to do yesterday. It'll be good to have it go forward to the next committee.
I will tell you all, as we have discussions with council and so forth, the mayor did make it very clear to me that he wanted to see, and actually I wanted to get with Derek because I may need a little bit of his help. He wanted to see, as well as Dave Wegman, but he's not here. He wanted to see all the different committees and organizations that are working to do flood management in our community, because the mayor was very clear he doesn't want overlapping responsibilities, which is absolutely correct. So this group will have to figure out, how does this group fit our committee here, how does it fit in the grand scheme of things with everything that's going on with the BRWM, with the work that the River Authority is doing, as well as the county. So that may be something that we probably have to get our heads together to make sure we identify those responsibilities.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest question that the River Authority has is where does this fit with BRWM? And because we don't want duplicative or overlapping functions.
Well, and I think it was made clear in Neffy's presentation, because the original BRWM did have a watershed improvement advisory committee, which is no longer in place. This is effectively sort of taking in the void of the stakeholder input that committee no longer is not active. The other thing, Neffy, that I did want to mention, and I wrote you an email about it right before I came, but I saw that on the B session next week, y'all are going to start the mass solicitation for the consultants to work on the bond projects. And I would just, again, putting my co-chair of the flood committee hat on, I do just want to remind you about the recommendation to see if there could be some expertise on nature-based solutions. Doesn't mean every project has to be nature-based, but just so long that there's somebody on the teams that could offer that in the design, or at least the analysis of the projects, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Suzanne, thank you for bringing that up. And for those that may be on the call, just to advise how the city of San Antonio does this, we basically do what we refer to as a mass selection. So we have over 100, and I mean, just in the drainage, there's quite a few projects, and just on the civil engineering side, there's like 163 projects. It's a huge number of projects. So instead of requiring companies that want to win, instead of requiring them to put a request for qualifications for 163 projects, which would be crazy to do and to review, forget that. What ends up happening is that we do what's called a mass selection. So generally, this in the city has done it a number of times before, and our consultants here in town, they know exactly how it's done. But we identify we identify a couple of projects in the civil side. We have some architectural work, so we identify a couple of projects in architectural and then in landscape areas. We identify those projects, and everybody bids on that project. And once they send in their proposals, then we're able to identify strengths and then I select them for individual projects themselves. That's kind of the mass selection. The great thing about it is that if say a company X doesn't win anything, we already have their proposal. We already know their qualifications. And if there's another project that comes up, we were able to select them. So that makes it really nice for us to be able to do some of those things. We've actually done that a number of times with companies that did not win, that still have expertise. But to answer your question, Suzanne, it's not only going to be a requirement to have experience in nature-based design and LID and green infrastructure. It's actually there's even a requirement from a points perspective. I can't tell you that, I can't get into some of those details, but there is going to be a requirement that expertise be included, because you're absolutely right. Not every project's going to have it. But the ones that will have it, we want to make sure that there's that expertise and understanding of it. But there will be points assigned to it, so it's going to be a good thing for us all. So, any other questions on the bond or the committee? If not, we'll move on. I do have another point. The Regional Flood Planning Group has received a written explanation from the Texas Water Development Board regarding the sponsorship details of the FMXs, specifically who can sponsor a submitted project. You know, we've had that discussions about if somebody submits a project, who is considered actually the sponsor. So there's additional information for those that are here present. There is an attachment there is some information here that was sent out. Some of you may have received it in email, maybe, and some of you may, but there is the letter, it's a question and answer. It starts with Dear RFPG Chair, Sponsor, and Technical Consultants. That email should be included. And if there's a number of questions about sponsorships and so forth, and please look over that information. And if you guys have any questions, I believe Anita's still on the call. We can refer to her. So that concludes my chair report. Yes, that's correct. That concludes my report. We will, and hearing no other additional questions, we will move on to item number 6, which is the update from the Region 12 subcommittees. And we'll turn the time over to our technical committee. Derek.
Yep. Thank you, Neffy. So you already touched on the sponsorship, which was a topic of discussion at our technical committee. We did, our engineering team, consultant team, did get some informal comments back from the Water Development Board. And so no action as of yet. They're still evaluating, but we anticipate at the next planning group meeting, there'll be some action that we need to take. We had a discussion. It was not a very long meeting, but we did talk about the continued task 4B and 5, the methodologies, basically the big listing of the projects and how those are shown and what information is collected. Talked about phased projects, and how to show that. And the thought right now is to list the entire project, even if it's phases 1 through 4, which might be in different stages of, phase 1 might have design, full planning and even design done, but then you need to plan the others. What the intent right now is to list the entire project, but make a note in the column so that, hey, phase 1 is this, phase 2 is this. So it could be split out. We just don't, it's trying to minimize the length of the list.
And that does, because I did have that question,
Yeah.
because we see many times that a full-on project, a full $10 million project, we probably can't do it in one chunk, but we generally will break it out into smaller, manageable, and then we do detailed design on those and not on the other. So
Right.
What you're saying is you would include the entire project, and then the parts of it you would break it out.
We would make in a notes column, for lack of a better term.
Okay.
Here, hey, phase 1 is this for $3 million in your $10 million example. Design is done. Phase 2 is $4 million, needs planning, so that it could be split. depending on what guidance we get from Water Development Board, what guidance, you know, maybe there's a better shot at a $3 million getting funded versus a $10 million getting funded. So it tries to give some flexibility without losing the detail. And then we also did talk through just how to manage the cost estimates challenges that I think everybody is, you know, in the engineering and construction world is extremely aware of. So, you know, we've got older projects that you may have had a cost estimate done in 2012. And that's what was submitted, but it's got to get brought forward to the 2020 cost estimate. So the consulting team is working through that to document, okay, bring it to 2020. It doesn't really address the current inflationary labor material issues, but at least it's going to get everything to 2020.
Derek, was there any discussion about, so obviously all of those projects are not going to get funded in 2020, but is there any discussion of putting some escalation factor for 5-10 years? Or was it just let's bring everything to today's date?
Far. It was to get it to year 2020.
Okay.
So it's not even to present. It just get it to you. That was the guidance of the Water Development.
Correct. That was the key thing. That's the year that all the regions on all the projects are being measured against.
Okay.
So yes, when you go in for funding, there's going to be issues, but at least that's the baseline. You can score every project, every region, all on the same baseline.
You're going to have some wonky things that happen because you may have a 2012 project that gets brought forward to 2020, but then there may be a project where an estimate is done literally this year in 2022. And because of what the market is doing, the costs are dramatically higher. So there's going to be some quirky things that happen that'll have to get sorted through over time. And we're continuing to look at the projects, and the goal is a recommendation of the full group at the next full group meeting.
I trust you have a pretty good list of projects.
Yeah, we were at what, 200 plus and counting.
And counting.
And they're 11 by 17 pages long to get all the columns.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll say while that sounds like an enormous amount, I think compared to some of the other regions, it's actually much smaller. But that's really because some of our regions within our basin are not necessarily bringing forward things at this time. And so there are much concentrated pockets of where those projects are coming from in our watershed. So while it sounds like a ton, it is not compared to some of the other planning groups.
Yeah, I mean, it does sound like a lot, but you're right. In the grand scheme of things and looking at our region, do we have all of those in GIS shapefiles? Do we have a geolocation for these?
We're currently adding them in as we go.
But we do have geographic locations. The reason why I'm asking is that if we're spending time to see if there's any overlapping projects, so, you know, San Antonio River at the confluence of the San Pedro Creek, you know, and somebody else submits it under a different name, San Pedro Creek at the confluence. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that there isn't any overlap in any of those projects. I'm assuming that's part of what you guys are doing.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think in terms of quantity, we're roughly sort of middle of the pack in terms of number of projects. I want to say Dallas and Houston were, you know, 400 or something, whereas you get to East Texas and it's just a different deal. Or maybe they don't flood there. I don't know, but but you know they had a lot less. So we're kind of middle from what we're hearing.
I guess, Derek, how are you asking for the submitters of those projects or the project sponsors to quantify benefit from the project?
Well, we are asking for a benefit cost ratio, but that is where the projects fall short of an FMP. So we're actually putting in another category where we're putting develop as an option to show that these are projects that are almost FMPs, but just because they don't have the benefit cost ratio, they are an FME.
I'm talking mainly about the actual benefit on the ground. In other words, a project is going to take houses out of the floodplain or going to reduce velocities or, you know, something that would tie to one of our goals. It's going to save lives or make a low water crossing more passable or something to that effect. Are those kinds of benefits somehow articulated so that we can tie it back to some of the goals that we've approved as a regional planning group?
Yeah, in the project descriptions, they've got pretty good explanations to those goals, relating to the goals. And we are following up with these entities, these stakeholders to then confirm.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Thank
I think there's a lot of pull from the consulting team because what they initially get might be very, very limited, and they have to go back and say, do you have more, you know, the BC ratio question. So it's not a, oh, here it is on a platter. There's little pulling teeth.
But Suzanne, you know, and I think we can go through a little bit more at the full meeting where we come in with the projects, the evaluation criteria provided by Water Development Board to move things through the FMP, so to start, you know, that process to kick which level it falls in, isn't really measuring those against our goals to prioritize it. It's measuring against much more defined things like, you know, does it reduce the 100-year flood risk? Does it address a flood problem within this watershed or these criteria? So it is a much more narrowly defined versus meeting specifically to our goals that our planning group has identified.
Because we don't pick. The
Correct.
reality is we don't have, Water Development Board has not released their evaluation criteria yet. So we are not selecting, if you will. It's basically, do they meet the screening criteria to make it into an FMP or an FME or an FMA?
Which pot does it go
which
into
pot?
is basically what's happening.
Yeah.
And even my understanding is that a lot of the screening information that we're supposed to do for these projects is not being given to our consultants, such as the adverse impact, what impact to water quality, lifetime costs, and that sort of thing. So am I correct on?
And I do want to add, especially if anybody is on the line listening, that I don't want that information to prevent somebody from submitting something. Because just because benefit cost ratio is required, maybe some preliminary cost estimates, some adverse impact analysis would be required, that doesn't mean you can't submit. So if there is a problem, please let us know, because in fact, you know, that there is an avenue by which that information could be gathered.
Yes, and you know, Neffy, one of the things, we had a lot of discussion on this around this area in our first technical committee meeting. And, you know, I think where we settled as a group was, okay, so if an entity submits a project and it's missing one item to be in a project category versus kicking to the next bucket, the consultants are going back and saying, hey, you know what, entity A, if you did this amount of work and gave us this extra information, you'd say here, that's what's lacking in yours. At some point, we had a discussion, is it the consultant's role to do that additional information? I think some of us felt, no, we need to, because what happens, how do you prioritize and make sure there's enough time to do all of them? And then in effect, you're giving advantage to who came in first or what. And so it doesn't kick someone out of consideration, it kicks them to another bucket. And so that is some of it, but they are reaching out to those sponsors and saying, you know, if you give us a little bit more, we might be able to move you into this category. And if you don't have it or don't have the dollars for it, maybe then you do belong in this bucket and the dollars pay for that next time around. As we get to the end of this, we did say if there are some that are very close and there is time and money, we can collectively discuss the consultant doing that little bit extra to fill in the blanks. But we didn't want them doing it day one and suddenly get to the end when we haven't done everything else we needed to, or we get a big pot from someone last minute that doesn't get the benefit of getting that and unfairly put them in a position. So we're trying to keep a little level playing field, but they're immediately going back and talking to those entities of what's missing. If you gave us a little bit more, we can further, it will improve your future evaluation here and what specifically could be done, not just this isn't enough. They're giving them specifics on that.
Ron,
Very
did
good.
you
I think
have
that was
anything
very
to
smart
add?
to do that.
Ron, did you want to add anything? I see your microphone on. We cannot hear you though. Yeah.
And I had a question after thinking about this conversation from our technical committee, if there would be some benefit to actually reaching out to, especially to our rural communities, about doing some kind of a workshop and helping people through this screening criteria. And I don't know, to get not only to help them through the process of maybe making it a project versus an evaluation, but also giving them a better understanding of how the process works.
Debbie, interestingly enough, right before we started, I was speaking with Linda and her staff about doing that very same thing. So maybe we can hear a little bit about some of the things that you guys are doing to do some outreach to some of these communities.
I just would remind that the timeline is getting really tight. We don't have a lot of wiggle room to. I mean, I know we've got meetings and that kind of stuff, but the window is closing in order for us to make that Water Development Board timeline for when we have to submit.
And wasn't the deadline for people to submit project entity sponsor May 31st or something? I mean, aren't we here?
Yeah, we're here.
Okay.
This
We're
would be mainly, I was thinking, a workshop for those that have already submitted. And we know what their project is. Basically, we know what they're missing, but helping them through that process, because there's some groups that haven't even begun looking at projects. And my understanding is that a lot of the folks from the different regions are stating that this is not definitive or giving
You can refine it. Is that allowed? Is that allowed?
Ron, can you confirm if you're allowed to move between buckets, essentially? Or Anita?
Yeah, could I just jump in and just ask, can you elaborate what do you mean by refine?
Well, I was under the impression that once the draft plan comes out on August the 1st, we have time between that draft and the final, that if a project can have more detail, or if there is some refinement in the benefits or the scope of that project, that can be added before it's finalized. I thought we couldn't add new projects, but we could refine the projects that had been submitted. Is that not accurate?
Yes, including the comments that you all will receive, both the formal comments from TWBB and the public comments that you're going to receive.
So there could be refinement between the draft and the final, just not new projects, but refinement of those FMXs that are submitted, whether they're a P or an S or an E, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And Anita, they can jump from one to another, right? The initial information submitted might have qualified it for a study, but if the entity finished a BC ratio, it could be added and then it would switch to the project bucket. Is that correct?
Right, that is correct. It could switch to like an FME and become an FME and become an FMP.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Everything we can do for these communities during this process and while we have these excellent consultants to help those rural communities to keep moving forward, I think will give greater value to what we're doing here.
Can I ask Linda if you can tell us of some of the outreach that we have already done that has already happened, or that you're planning to do? Oh yeah, that's part of it. I'm sorry. That's
Okay.
right.
No, that's okay.
That's right. All right. Yeah, let's do that, and then I think that may answer your comment, Debbie. I just wanted to address your comment, but let's go on to
Okay.
a report on the outreach committee.
All right, I'll start it and then I'll toss it over to Linda and her team. So I'm going to talk first about the public meeting outreach, and then if there's stakeholder outreach that's also been happening, but I'm specifically talking about the public outreach initially. So as you know, we did originally the one round of public meetings that happened, I think, during the freeze, which obviously wasn't great timing for us, not that anything under our control. But now we're going to go out with another round of public meetings, and those are going to be held on Monday, June the 6th from 6:30 to 8 at Sam Rayburn Middle School. Tuesday, June the 7th from 6:30 to 8 at the City of Schertz North Center. And June the 16th, Thursday, June the 16th, I'm assuming at the same time, 6:30 to 8. It wasn't on this little thing. At Jack's Cafe in Floresville, and apparently this is a place where many entities downstream meet in this particular location in Floresville. So it's not like we're having a party. It is a place where people know to meet. So yeah, I know. I asked the same question. So these meetings are really, we're trying to gear these meetings around trying to get the public to be as involved as possible on this. Granted, we know that the public is not necessarily going to say, please do this channel project or this creek project or whatever. They may not know. They may understand that they may be able to describe there's a flooding issue. We can tell them there's been a project potentially identified for that area. What have been the concerns? We can get that feedback. We also want to talk about the goals and objectives of this process that we're doing. We've already adopted goals as a regional planning group. We want to make sure that those are clear and that the community understands what we're trying to do. So having it as interactive as possible, but also making sure that people understand what we're doing. You don't have to be a technical expert to be able to have good, meaningful input into this process is what we're trying to convey. So the team has, they've sent a letter or an email out to all the elected officials in the area, trying to get them to help us promote this and also participate. We're doing social media outreach. We're going to do some traditional media outreach. We're trying to use the River Authority and all the various connections that they have within the basin. We're just encouraging anyone on the planning group to please take the information that I believe is either going to be or has been sent to everyone to add it to your social media, get it to your respective your respective outreach channels as much as you can, because we really would like to have the public participate in these meetings. We will also have an online opportunity for people to provide input, even though they may not be able to go to the meetings. I think we'll do similar to what we did last time. I think is that, Ron did a kind of a video of his presentation. I think it'd be good to do that again, just in case people want to see that online and aren't able to come to the meetings. And then after this outreach that we're doing, we're going to talk again about what we're going to do after the draft plan comes out in August. There's a 30-day comment period. Now we could just be, we could just say it's out for public comment, go and comment, or we could try to do something more proactive to try to get people to participate, and actually participate in the public meeting. I think we have to have an official public meeting that could be in association with one of our meetings, our regular meetings. But as you know, we meet during the day, and that limits the ability for the public to participate. So at our next outreach committee meeting, we're going to talk about what we think we want to do. Given this is the first time this has happened, we do think we need to try to get as much input as possible. But now I'll turn it over to Linda to cover anything I didn't cover, and then also talk. I know that Ron and his team have been doing direct individual outreach to stakeholders, other cities, floodplain administrators, others, to try to get projects submitted. But those things have also been going on simultaneous to this.
Right. There, exactly what you've been saying. And if you look at your packet, and I don't know if this is part of what you all are going to present from HCR, but there's copies of of what the social media looks like, and then the flyer. So you can see the kind of information that we sent out.
May I ask a question? I know
Sure.
that one time that we talked about putting our goals or linking, or at least a link on our website for the goals. Would that be helpful to have on the information that's being sent out, a link to the goals for people to look at if they would be interested, so they could make more informed decisions or comments?
I don't think it would hurt anything. What we were talking about doing, we haven't quite finalized it, but what we were thinking about doing was taking a few of the goals, because there's so many of them, to take a few of the goals that would seem to be more directly affecting people, that they would be more interested in, not as more, less, that they would be more interested, probably wouldn't be interested in the technical goals, but the kinds of things like educational kinds of deals, knowing where low water crossings are, that sort of thing, and pulling those out and then doing some kind of a worksheet or workshop type thing where they would say, yeah, this is a good idea, or we need more this kind of information about that, and doing it that way rather than giving them just saying this laundry list of goals, because frankly, a lot of them probably, they're not going to be all that. It's all, yeah, well, it's really good. Yeah. And rather than that, instead of that, to get something that they would have a much more direct impact on them, and them understanding the kinds of things that would come out of a flood plan, rather than just, we're going to put a dam here, we're going to have something over here. So that was
Right.
the intention. That was a suggestion that was made at the outreach committee meeting. That's kind of the direction we're going.
Right. We wanted to take those goals and kind of group them into bigger buckets. The public may not care that people have certain training that floodplain managers have certain training. We think that's important, but some of they may not see it as that technical. We may just say we want to increase the expertise of the region in a particular area, for example. We want to just try to take those very technical goals and roll them up into something that the public can understand and appreciate in the presentation that we're doing.
Right.
Like, what are we trying to achieve through this process? Saving of life and property, and making sure that we can improve
Right.
safety
Well, and we're doing it by achieving
by
these
these
particular
things.
goals.
Exactly right.
Yeah. That was the intention.
We probably need to put I think we talked about on these flyers, the link to, I know we have it on, there's a share feedback link, but just to the website.
See on the flyer does have it. See the QR code?
Right, but I'm talking about the social media flyer.
Yeah, the social media one doesn't have a link on it.
Yeah, we probably should. Oh, okay. All right.
May I just add that we did send out 156 personalized emails. That was 75 to county elected officials, which included the county judge and the commissioners, as well as 81 city officials. And that included all council members, as well as the city manager. We're also looking at the Wilson County News, the Northeast Herald, and the Community Impact newspapers, which serve North San Antonio, or really North Bexar County and Northeast Bexar County. So we're looking at ads there. And then beginning June 1, we would begin.
Oh,
Sorry, beginning June 1.
You can let go.
I can let go. All right, thank you. Beginning June 1, we will send out media alerts for the first two meetings on June 6 and 7. And then before the June 16th meeting, around the 13th or so, we would send out that second media alert.
Thank you for that. That was one of the questions that I had, if we were doing specific outreach to elected officials, because I would certainly venture to say that it's important that we're reaching out to the floodplain administrators. So in some cases, it might be a fire chief or sheriff, or somebody like that that would know some of the technical information. But I appreciate you guys also reaching out to some of the elected officials to make them aware of some of the efforts and work that's happening, because I think that's also going to be very key and important.
The reaching out to the elected officials has a twofold purpose. One was to give them that information, to let them know these meetings are happening, but also to ask them to send out the information to their email lists and their whoever their contacts are. So it's really it's got a double purpose. It's not just letting them know, but we're hoping that they'll take this, because the flyer and the social media information are attached to what they get, and attached to the email letter that they'll get, so that they can forward it on or do whatever. Hopefully they'll do something with it.
Very good. Any other questions that anybody from the committee may have for either the technical or the outreach committee? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item.
We do encourage any of you to go to those meetings if you can. We just can't have a quorum, as I understand it. So if you're going to go, let us know. Let Kendall know, so that we can make sure that we're okay. Thank you.
I did fail to recognize the presence of our consultants today. I'm sorry. I know, right? They're much better looking than the scruffy guys that usually show up. So let me give a minute if you guys can introduce yourselves. What's that?
I said I can still hear you.
Yeah, I thought he wasn't responding. That's what got him to respond. Let me take a moment so that you guys introduce yourself. Then it sounds like Ron has got his mic working now, and then we'll turn the time over to him. So.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Ludovine. I'm with HDR, and I'm working with Ron, the HDR side.
Daniel Perry with Half Associates, working in place of Troy right now. I'm not as tall, but I am scruffy, so there you go.
Welcome, you guys.
Oh, one more. My name's Mark Hall. I'm with Hanson, and I'll be working with Ron on Task 9.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Welcome, you guys. Let me turn the time over now to Ron, who I think got his act together, or his microphone working.
Yes, I think y'all can all hear me now. Does it sound okay? Everyone's able to hear me?
Yep, you're good.
Yes, sir.
We got
We
you,
can
Ron.
hear you.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. Apologize for not being in person today, but I promise y'all don't want me there. Yesterday, found out my wife tested positive for COVID, so I'll be quarantined in this box for some time, I guess. But she's doing well, so all is good. So get it kicked off here, get it rolling. I think I was going to talk about the outreach update, but I think they did a better job than I could do. So thank you, Linda and Laura and Suzanne, for that. I'll touch on a couple things, but we'll go through that pretty quick. We got some comments from the Water Development Board. As Neffy mentioned, or Derek mentioned, I can't remember who did, we got some comments on the January 7th submittal, and we just recently got comments on the March 7th submittal. And so while those are informal comments and we do not have to respond formally, we are putting together a comment response log to provide to the planning group so that y'all can see what we're doing. As part of that, there were some minor adjustments that we're going to have to make to the goals and one of our processes that you will have to vote on at the next meeting. So just wanted to make you aware of that. But Hopefully by the next meeting, I'll be able to provide you the comments, and we'll be able to take care of any administrative things that need to come out of that. And then while we're working on the FMXs, we figured we'd kick off a task 6 through 9 discussion. So that's going to be the bulk of what we do today. So Kendall, I think you can advance and we can walk through. I think they gave you the dates. And one of the things that we are working on to add to what everyone was saying is, if y'all remember the comment map that we had, we are adding our projects to the comment map. And a part of that is a GIS file, Neffy, that we will be able to correspond to where the project location is, and a little bit of a description once you click on it. And so people will be able to tell what the project is. And that's kind of the comments. Hey, do you agree with this project? And do you know of any others that may come? As part of that, we're also, Suzanne and Debbie, we are working on another little form on the side that you'll click on. That'll be questions on the goals that we can get input on our goals on that comment map. So we'll actually kind of do twofold. Yeah, I know we wanted to show people the goals, but we're also going to be able to get some comments. I know that's not required, and I don't know how much we can do with that, but at least we can let the public comment on the goals and we can get some feedback on them. So that is in the works, and we're that is being updated. The comment map is live, and we'll be updating that up until the meeting time. Keep it, I think, next slide. Next slide, yeah. And so we received the comments again. We'll provide these responses to the planning group committee at the next meeting so we can take action on that. And I guess we're going to jump into the task 6 through 9. So it was, I included task 6 through 9 as part of the guidelines in your packet so that you can see, but I've included some of that right up here. But first, I know he has to step out pretty quick, but I want to introduce somebody that I have that's helping me on this task 6. Darren, as he mentioned, he's no longer with SAWS. Darren Thompson is with HDR, and with his experience with on the ASRs and the groundwater recharge, and from that aspect, from the SAWS perspective, we thought he'd be a great asset to the team as part of working with Region L. And I think Lauren was on previously, but I think she had to jump off. So we are going to be working with Region L, the water planning side of things. But I figured I'd get Darren maybe introduce himself and kind of maybe if he wants to talk a little bit about what he's looked at so far.
Well, hello, everybody. It's nice to see and hear some familiar faces. And again, for those who don't know me, again, my name is Darren Thompson. I am recently retired from SAWS, so I guess 2.5 months in now, and have moved over to HDR. And I'm excited to get back into the planning realm of the region and bring my knowledge and expertise to the table. But I've been looking into the 6A and 6B and how those sections are going to be set up moving forward, and work with Ron and Ludovine to get those together. But I don't know, Ron, do you want to go through these? Do you want me to go through these, or how do you want to handle that?
Sure, I'll take a stab at it, Darren. If I mess anything up, you can throw something at me or yell at me tomorrow.
All right.
I know Darren has to jump off pretty quick, so if y'all see him disappear, I think his oldest daughter's graduating today, so congratulations, Darren, and go have when you have to jump off, we understand. So 6A is the kind of the easier part of chapter 6 or task 6. It's kind of a summary of what's going to happen if we implement all of the projects. And you ask, well, Ron, how are you going to tell what the implication is for if we put all these projects together? Ideally, it's just a region-wide summary of the relative reduction in flood risk that implementation of the flood plan would achieve. So, I think we can say we feel that we would, by implementing these, we think we would remove this many critical structures, this many low water crossings. We don't have to get into the fact that, the exact number of acres or anything like that. I just think in general, we'll be able to provide the infrastructure that we removed and any, nature-based enhancements that we might be able to achieve, things of that nature. How do we provide that? And then we have to provide a statement of no negative impacts to the best of our knowledge, that we've looked at these and these projects are not going to provide negative impacts downstream. And then potential positive and negative socio-economic or recreational impacts. If we go into an area and we're going to have if we're proposing buyouts, we might have to talk about the socioeconomics of that. And the most of the recreation will probably be positive. I would doubt that some of it is negative, but I think the socioeconomic could be positive or negative. So in general, we'll be able to provide that, those kind of comments. And then impacts to the environment, as we mentioned, agriculture, do we remove farmland? Water quality, that's going to be, that's always a tough one. Erosion, sedimentation, and, Debbie's brought up some good points and, some of the things we can look at with what the River Authority's done. So yes, we're going to look at that. We're going to try to, again, it's a region-wide summary. It's a generalization of what we think that we can provide. It's, and we'll have to caveat it that we're not guaranteeing any of these things are in concrete, but we think that these improvements could have this added benefit. So that's 6A. 6B, next slide, is a little bit more direct. It's getting into the contributions and impacts to water supply development and the state of the water plan. Sounds easy in words, I think, but it's tougher than just saying drill a hole into the aquifer. Hey, Darren, why don't you just design another ASR for us? But so we're trying to figure out how we can show some impacts to water supply, and if any of these do. So I think there's we must summarize positive and negative impacts to the flood plan, and so you have to say if we think that they're going to benefit indirectly, directly, indirectly, or we anticipate no impact. And a lot of it's going to be anticipate no impact, right? I mean, there's going to be things that, especially any policy that a lot of the policy won't have direct impact. Anything that's not in the recharge zone won't have a direct impact. So we'll have to be cognizant of that. But looking at some of the things, we know that there can be some impacts to water supply. We think that there could be some impacts to water supply and groundwater recharge, but we know that's going to be insignificant to probably the flood reduction part of it. But hopefully we can show some of that, and we're looking at ways to show some of that if there are any. And then there's a table listing the FMSs and FMPs, if implemented, would negatively reduce water availability or water supply. And that's, a lot of that is so if we have an example of that is there's a water supply basin that we would remove some of the water supply and use some of that storage as detention. And that's not anything we're going to do. So I don't see us, since we have limited surface storage, I don't see us using that up. So I don't see how we can really negatively impact very many. I guess, Darren, is there anything you wanted to add? I just wanted to hit it high level, and you've been looking at this already from in our region and Central Texas in another region. So, anything else you'd like to add to that discussion?
I think you covered it all, Ron. Again, I think you're right about the fact of it's going to be really hard to negatively impact water supply in this area. But again, we'll go through all the FMPs and FMSs and see if there is, but I don't see much happening in this region.
Awesome. Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Darren, for that. I'll pause a second before we go to the next task. Are there any questions on task 6A or B for Darren or myself? All
I
right.
don't think so. I don't think so. Ron, let's move on.
Awesome. Thank you, Neffy. Task
One-
7.
sorry. Ron, one quick question. When do you anticipate to finish the impact analysis?
The impact analysis, the task 6.
Yes, where you are talking about the benefits or the negative impacts that might be possible to the environment, socioeconomic.
Yes. So all of that, as part of that, is we're waiting to get the full list of FMSs, FMPs, FMEs.
Mhm.
So we get the list. This, we're not taking any more. Hopefully, we will vote on that at the next meeting. And before then, we're going to start developing the list. So we're going to start on that now. And so hopefully, I think we'll be able to update you at the next meeting where we're at on that. And show how that would, all of this is going to start coming pretty quickly, Debbie. So I would bet by the next meeting we'd have a lot more meat on the table to start chewing on. Awesome. Task 7. So task 7 and 8, my friends at HAF are going to be leading this task, but I'm going to take a shot here. So task 7, this one's going to get into the summary of flood response information activity. So as defined by FEMA, there's the 4 phases of emergency management. Flood mitigation is obviously the one that we're taking care of. Flood mitigation, right, with the whole projects, FMSs, FMXs, and so that's flood mitigation. So this task will focus on preparedness, responsiveness, and recovery. And so we'll be reaching out to different communities to define preparedness, responsiveness, and recovery. I think we can everything from our flood warning systems to our hazard mitigation plans and recovery, and some of the other things that we're going to do is going to be critical. And so we think that this is, we're going to, according to this task, it's limited to a summary, right? We're going to provide a summary of preparations for flood responses, activities, and recovery, and does not require planning groups to propose new or modified flood preparedness, response, or recovery. It's just documenting what's in place, and at their discretion, the planning groups may include policy recommendations related to this plan as appropriate in Chapter 8, or Task 8, and we'll talk about that. But ultimately, this is kind of just documenting, reaching out to the floodplain managers and the emergency responders and saying, what do we have in place for the region? And so that'll be a task that's going on. I think it'll be pretty interesting to see, right? I think that can, once we see the outcome of Task 7, we might find some limitations that we do have in the region. And so I think the outcome of this could be eye-opening, and or we might say, man, we're really well prepared. I don't know if anyone's ever really sat back and documented and say, as a whole in the region, where are our gaps? And so hopefully this will identify that, and we'll be able to, this could possibly add to future phases of the flood plan, or as we move forward. But essentially, that's what Task 7 is. Task 8.
Wait, Ron, before you move on from Task 7, Neffy,
Yes.
I'm just curious. Y'all, the city and the county, at least here, I know, has done a good job trying to pull together all the emergency response, at the EOC, and y'all tried to do that. I'm just wondering, and I know that y'all have done in the past some type of preparedness and response to flooding. I mean, because that's the biggest natural disaster that we have to address. I'm just curious how that's going to dovetail, how the planning and preparation that y'all have done is going to tie in. And then also, of course, Derek and the work that Sarah has done with, I know, with the modeling and the flood preparedness and the all the things that y'all have done. How is that going to tie in? Because we spent a lot of time and energy on it. I just want to make sure that they are aware and it's captured.
Let me respond by saying that we are absolutely right. We've spent a lot of time working at the EOC, and it's a combined EOC with Bexar County, and we do work collaboratively. And I've been really excited even when you were at the River Authority, and Derek continues, and I'm hoping he gets more involved. But staff has the River Authority staff has participated in a number of tabletop exercises. The last one we had was, obviously the Almost Dam is always kind of the one we're always testing, but we're looking at potentially moving it to different locations for that very same thing. This slide that Ron presented, the 4 phases of emergency management, is one actually that I'm very familiar with because we certainly work with that. So I don't know if Ron has actually reached out to the EOC quite yet, but a lot of the information that is needed is available, and it has come together very well, at least within Bexar County.
Yeah, I'll just echo, and we're continuing the dialogue about growing the presence for emergencies, for certain types of emergencies within the EOC. It's going to be in the BRWM next meeting. We're talking about how do we update and maybe expand Bear Flood. So all of that is going on as well. I think it was you that made the comment earlier about there's all these different flood activities, and it's really true. So we're trying to find a way to sort of synthesize that. I don't think we're alone in that, but just try to make sure there's no overlap in where the expertise lies in the appropriate places, and how do we collaborate so we're not being redundant.
And I know that, the River Authority has, invested a lot of time and energy and money into new tools that are really great for this area. So I guess I don't know who, Ron, is leading this on your team, but I mean, I do think there's been so much investment that's been made here that it would be great to capture it, because I think it could be a model for what other communities could be doing and some of the tools that have been developed here.
Yeah, it continues because predictive flood is kicking off in Wilson and Carnes now. So,
and I don't know how familiar they are with that work that you've done.
Yeah, Suzanne, I think you bring up great points. I'm well aware of kind of what was set up with the EOC locally, kind of with the early workings with the original flood warning system and us going through that response and developing that. We also we've also developed some of the emergency management plans for some of the high hazard dams in Bexar County, and so we're aware of that. So I think we have a good handle on it. I think you're right on in saying that. I think locally we go above and beyond, but we want to make sure that everybody's the same way. And I do know that from talking with Dave Mock and the team in Bandera, they're well versed in all of this. But I know that they have ideas on how they can get better and things that they can do. Talking about being able to respond to some of the the low water crossings that are up for days, being able to respond with drones and different things. So they have some great ideas there. And at coastal, we know coastal, we do have coastal response that we have to reach out to. And so we're collecting all of that too. So yeah, it's going to be a large effort, and it's going to be interesting to see what's what as we go through and do that. But yes, we are aware of getting with the EOC. And again, Task 7 will be led by Troy's team, and we will be, Ludovine and I will support him, but Troy's team will be leading that, and we will move from there. So yes, thanks for the input. All right, Task 8. This one, I know we've had some discussion on. It's what is this really this task? What's it really gonna be? And so some of the things is is to provide legislative recommendation to facilitate floodplain management, flood mitigation planning. It can be regulatory or administrative recommendations. You know, the recommendations the planning group desires to achieve their goals, and recommendations regarding potential new revenue raising opportunities, new flood authorities, flood development funds, operation and maintenance management. So there, all of this is going to be wrapped up into legislative recommendations. We are planning to develop a list to bring to the technical committee to discuss this. We will, you know, I think this is bigger than just Region 12. It's, you know, there's going to be, yes, I do think that Region 12 may have their own specific that we need to bring to the table, but I think we'll want to stand together as all the regions will want to stand together on some of these issues. Kind of like what we talked about is, you know, when we say making recommendations that the Water Development Board and others, the state, play a bigger role in some of the floodplain managers toolbox that we've called it, you know, TFMA or others. So, you know, things like that we've made recommendations on. And, but part of it, and I thought it was pretty strong, came straight from the guidelines, is these recommendations may address items that benefit or can be implemented at the local, regional, or state level. Recommendations in general are anticipated to be aimed at supporting flood risk reduction and supporting implementation of regional flood plans, including exploring innovative ways of funding flood risk reduction activities. Recommendations may include changes to the planning process. So, you know, as we've been through this process now, I think we've maybe have identified some ways of improvement, so we can provide those. You know, the overall state flood planning process. And we can also make policy recommendations for the legislature to consider. So this is a big task. This task will be led by Troy's team, Task and Half Associates, Task 8. We'll be supporting him, and you know, we will have conversations with our other teams in other regions and kind of see how things are going. But we will come with a list of recommendations to the technical committee, but we will put the full recommendations in this chapter in front of the entire group. Don't have a lot of specifics on what we're looking at and where we're going with this one yet. You know, there's a lot of things have been thrown around internally, but you know, so if there's any questions, I can answer those. We are going to be bringing you something probably by the next meeting, definitely to the technical committee to start chewing on. And but if you have any recommendations on something or something's near and dear to you, you know, please reach out to Troy or myself, and we'll make sure that those get included. Because again, you know, we've been through this process now, so there may be things. Again, there may be local floodplain management things we think need to be brought up, state and as far as statewide that we can bring up. So this is our chance to kind of let the board know what we think needs to be changed and things that need to be brought up to the state legislature. So any questions on Task 8?
I guess my only concern is that, I mean, this is a big task, and I just worry that, so the technical committee is their next meeting is, they're going to have to be looking at all of those 200 projects or so and bringing that forward to this group following meeting to deal with that, which is a lot. And then also they're going to have to be looking at all of these potential legislative at the same meeting, their next meeting. And I just think that's a lot for June. I'm wondering if we could do the projects and then think about the legislative piece maybe in July or something. And then I'm just worried that that's a lot for one meeting, our next meeting. If we're
Yes, ma'am. And
200 projects.
And I think we'll be back to, I think we'll be back to similar to what we did previously. Probably, I think in June, we're probably going to end up having 2 meetings in July again. I mean, and sorry, same way we had in May or April. We had 2 meetings, and so we'll probably have 2 meetings again in June.
I think July, right? July. Because, I mean, June,
Yeah, June is like the sort of the projects are the focus.
right, exactly.
And the draft reports due 1 August.
Yes.
So there seems like July is
Crunch
the place for this other, well, yes, crunch time. Little light reading going on. But like, it seems like July might be the best opportunity for these other, like, get the projects done in June and then the other stuff in July.
Yeah, something of that nature. But we will be bringing it to the technical committee. Yes.
Because God knows I love meetings, but you know, I don't know, Ron.
Yeah, I just don't know how we're going to have 2 planning meetings. I mean, two of this group meetings in June if we're not even finishing the public meetings until the 16th. Then y'all have to meet sometime after. The technical committee, and then we have to have a meet. I don't know.
The technical committee, we're scheduled for June 23rd is
Right,
our
so-
next meeting. So that was after everything else, but
So I thought we were looking at like the 28th or so for the next meeting of this big group. So I don't know how you're going to have another. I don't know. That's what I understood from Kendall, is because I was trying to block out my calendar as to when we were going to potentially be meeting again for this group.
I don't see how we can
may
do
have
it
to
without
double up
having a
in
July
July,
meeting.
not
We're
June.
going to have to have 2 at least. I'm sorry.
No,
We may
I
have
was
to double up in July, not June. I think that was misspoken. That's why.
Yes, I think, and I was talking about a technical doubling up on the technical committee meeting, not necessarily the planning group meeting. We'll see how that goes, but that was going to be the technical committee.
Again,
Do you hate us, Ron? Just wondering.
That was for Neffy's comment on the ugly guys, and you always kicking me anyway.
except Neffy's not on that committee. So be nice.
That's right.
Oh yeah, okay. Now you're speaking.
You
up
kicked
to
me
to
out.
be-
Remember, Ron?
I
You
get it.
kicked me out of the meeting.
Please.
I'm just saying there's a lot to approve between now and the end of January or the end of June. Sorry, July, and so the meetings will be crunch time for sure.
yeah. Okay.
Awesome. Task 9. Task 9, money. And for this, Mark, Mr. Hall is in the room. Mark's with Hanson, and he's going to be supporting on this. And I'll let him give it. Mark, why don't you give yourself a little bit of introduction before I go through all of this? Go ahead, Mark.
Well, Mark Hall, and I was had started out with a career with the Water Development Board. I was there for about 30 years or so, and had a chance to build a lot of the programs. I've gone through a lot of planning and funding, thousands and thousands of projects. So I think I feel comfortable that I could help out here with, if I see anything. I'm working for a company called Hanson Professional Services. We're an engineering firm, but we're subbing with Ron for this effort. So that's me in short. Anything? Did I miss anything, Ron?
No, I just mainly wanted to everyone to know your background. We had Mark on the team for his expert. He's at the Water Development Board and knows a lot about the funding, and will be able to definitely help us from a statewide aspect of that and what we can and can't do. And so this analysis is looking at how local governments finance the recommended FMSs, FMPs, and FMEs. The assessment would also describe the role the planning group proposes for the state, and as projects are implemented, those improvements and associated benefits shall be incorporated into subsequent RFPs. Next slide. So kind of here's an example of the table. These projects, this is, I got an email today, and I just want to make sure that everybody knows these are not Region 12 projects. This is the example out of the guidelines. These are not Region 12. These are nothing that we have coming out. I know there's a levee improvements project on there. We're not proposing any levee improvements, I promise. So be aware of that. This is just an example of, here are the projects. Here's what the fee is, and here's the recommendation and the proposed funding that we're proposing for these projects. So as you can see, we'll have to put locally as a sponsor providing 10%, 20%, and Mark's going to be able to help us go through that and figure out what funding sources could be available, and maybe there's multiple funding sources. There's the state funding sources, there's the local funding sources, and are there possible others going forward? So it's a pretty straightforward table. We'll probably have to be working with each one of the individual entities, our sponsors, as we go through this. But in a nutshell, this is ultimately the meat of what we're going to be doing. Plus, just identifying, this is identifying in general what options are available for funding opportunities, and we will be looking into each one of those and describing those. And I think Mark has already sent me a list of possible funding sources and how things are going to work from that. And so he has a great idea of others available. And so, Mark, is there anything else you wanted to add to Task 9 and what you've looked at so far?
The Water Development Board came out with a thing called the Community Official Flood Resource Guide. Have you seen it? It came out in February. And first of all, I want to say that Sarah is highlighted as an example role model for outreach, by the way. So in that document, this is what it looks like. So in there, it's a very, very good document. So for those of you working on the outreach, take a look, because it gives, in the case of Task 9, it gives a one-pager on the funding that's available for flood, and it's really good. Also, there's a group which is it's Water Development Board's working with TDM, which is working with GLO. Those three organizations right there are significant funders for flood, and they have a group called FLIC. It's the Flood Infrastructure Coordination Committee. Are you familiar with that? It looks like y'all are. But they came up with a very good template. They call it a checklist, which shows all the types of entities that can be funded, for which programs are they eligible, the types of requirements that are needed. So it's in this document. It's in this Community Official Flood Resource Guide. And I think that's the place to start for the committee as we go forward. And there are one-offs. There's disaster funds that have come in, and many of the people that you know have received those. If I get it right, it's the bipartisan infrastructure law that came out with billions and billions of funding. They identified specific funding agencies and programs are funneling all of that money through existing funding programs. I looked at it yesterday. I didn't see anything that popped out at me other than the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, which is with the Water Development Board, possible Bureau of Reclamation, possibly the Department of Interior. But I think the main ones to focus, we'll find out. And I benchmarked with another region, was probably going to end up being FEMA. It'll be, TDM type stuff, FEMA. It'll be the Water Development Board, which includes the Flood Infrastructure Fund, which you're very familiar with, I'm sure. And then also GLO, which is the HUD kind of disaster relief mitigation type stuff. So anyway, I see nods, so you're very familiar, but I think what we're finding on the financial end, and when you go out and talk with folks, which is what this task is, it's making sure that we build upon what the outreach committee is currently doing. You're doing great work. It's just to make sure that this information is also collected. You were talking about emails, letters, all of that. This is what you have to decide. We have to decide on how to proceed on getting this other information as well. So anyway, that's pretty much it, Ron.
Also in the bipartisan infrastructure bill, there is money for nature-based solutions. And that we could also identify, particularly if communities are going to go forward with nature-based projects, there's money in there for that. So you may want to look at that as in your matrix.
Yeah.
And see how that applies. Because again, a project may not be completely nature-based, but some component of it could be nature-based, and they could potentially get some funding for that. And then I thought NOAA also had money for potential flood
Possible.
related projects.
Possible. I didn't
Yeah,
spot.
you may want to check that one out too.
Sure will.
I guess the other thing is, this process is to sort of recommend how, like potential ways in which the state can help local governments fund these as well? I mean, are we going to have some potential recommendations? Would that go in this section or section 8 for recommendations?
I don't know. I'll have to let Ron speak to section 8, but as far as task 9 goes, the deliverable is to find out what the needs are of the sponsors in your region, in your basin, and then find out what they intend to do to fund. So it's not necessarily a conclusion you make, it's finding out what they intend to do. So part of what the Water Development Board wants to do is they want to understand what's happening in the watersheds. This is to help them do that. And then another deliverable of the committee, of the planning group, will be to suggest what the regional flood planning group's role should be in providing financing in the future. So the closest benchmark that I can give you is what I had experienced in the regional flood planning world with the Water Development Board. In that case, you had to be a strategy. You had to be consistent with the plan, right? So if a water project was not in the plan, it was not consistent, it was therefore not eligible to receive Water Development Board funding or any state funding. And it was also not eligible to receive any permitting on it if it was not consistent with the plan. So this is the kind of thing that you have to decide how you want to do it in this scenario, in this situation as well. In regards to funding.
So will this, I mean, I understand about the financing, but will we ultimately do some type of a gap analysis? I mean, the reality here is the reason that a lot of flood projects have not been funded locally is because there's not enough money locally to fund a lot of the needs that exist. And that's why the state flood planning process was hopefully trying to understand the difference between what the local communities are able to fund and what the need is, so that hopefully the state would then see that there's the need to have something like a SWIFT ongoing for flood infrastructure funding.
I think you're spot on.
Would that be identified? The concept here to identify what that gap is?
I believe now I'm also exploring this, but I believe that the gap will be identified by seeing just what the demand is, what the need is out there. And then they apply it next to the available existing funding tools, which are, I feel safe in saying, are overprescribed. So if you look at how many $1 billion worth of projects that were identified for the fifth that they did, and then both SRF, state revolving funds, particularly the clean water SRF, last fiscal year, they had about $150 million worth of capacity. They had over $1 billion worth of needs identified in that. So you can see what the gaps are. You can see what the need is.
But Suzanne, I want to clarify one of the things. Mark kept using the word they. They is not us. They is Water Development Board.
Correct.
I mean, there is no process where we as a group are identifying, prioritizing, ranking. We are assembling a list and sending it off. We can make some recommendations and things probably in that section 8, but we aren't identifying those. It's a they being the state. So, a lot of our kind of, and that was going to be one of my questions. I don't know, Mark, if you know, or Ron or Anita still on, is the Water Development Board, what's the timeline of when you think they'll have their criteria and ranking prepared? Because they're ultimately going to decide what gets prioritized and doesn't. And they don't even know that yet. So we don't even know how to steer information here to, make our own unofficial recommendation. So I don't know if we have a timeline guess on that, guys.
Everything that's been told to me on that is it will not happen in time. Definitely not in time for the draft submittal. Maybe for the final, but likely not.
Anita, are you still on the call? Maybe you can respond to that question.
I'm here. Can you repeat that question for me?
It's Kara. It was really just, do we know a timeline of when Water Development Board will have that criteria and ranking available, and understanding what those criteria are going to be to rank projects for funding?
No, they have not given us a date yet or when they would put that information out. They haven't shared that with any of us at this time.
Thank you.
Debbie Reed, a question about my understanding that in the document that we create, we have to have specific projects or generalities of projects and goals in order for them to receive future state funding.
Hey, Ron, can you
It's the
talk to that?
it's the exact project. We have to have each one of the FMSs, FMPs, FMEs will go through this.
Yeah, the flood infrastructure fund that was established before all this started, it was one time. I mean, and it's all over prescribed, as you have said. We're trying to make the case for the state to continue that type of funding mechanism or strategy. Like
in
SWIFT.
my mind, that task 8, we're going into session. We know there's already money earmarked for it. We know that's coming. It's what input do we want and need? And, just generally one of my comments of something Mark said, we're on the water side. If you're not in the plan, you're not eligible for money. For me, drainage projects need to move faster than a 5-year plan process. And I hope we don't come back with a recommendation that's so prescriptive for us that says, if you're not there, you don't. Water projects move at a much different timeline. Certainly there are going to be those communities, probably downstream, but smaller communities too, that just didn't quite participate in this round, or know, that I would hate to say sit on the sidelines for 5 years.
I guess I agree with you, Kara, in that regard, but there has to be some incentive for people to participate in the flood planning process. Otherwise, there's no reason to do this, because you can still get funding if you don't go through all of this and have the public stakeholder process and be prioritized and look at it holistically. Maybe there needs to be some way that there's an interim step. In other words, if you're not in the program, if you're not there, you can still, like, even with the flood planning process, the water planning process, there is an amendment process that you can, because the committee is still meeting.
Agreed.
And you can come in and you can do an amendment and you can say, I wasn't in the plan, but here. Now that's a little bit more prescriptive, but we could be pretty light on what it takes to get in. If you're not in the plan, but you realize, I want to get state funding because now there's state funding available. I'm going to go to my committee, my planning group. I'm going to submit my plan. So we're pretty easy about amending, but I think there should be some way that people are encouraged to participate.
Oh, I agree. And I think anybody who isn't is still going to be at the back of a line, and whatever criteria it is, they're not going to rank high at first and should have to come through a process. We can't predict what's going to be the next flood that happens and how do we have to be responsive, and what project really should have been on here that just wasn't because there wasn't a sponsor, and really needing to be more proactive in the amendment and update of this process than you do on the water side because of the time and the reactionary portion of what these projects are.
Yeah, and I think
Ron, anything else?
Yeah, I think to that point, I think kind of alluding to kind of what Mark said and kind of incorporating everything. So Mark said that there was $150 million in funding and $1 billion in need. I think when you look at the state in whole right now, I don't think they have any clue. I don't think anybody could guesstimate what the need is. And I think that's what Task 9 essentially does, right? We can take this funding need, right? The Water Development Board can sum up the funding need that'll be required to implement these projects and by how we develop this. And they can say, okay, that's this many billions of dollars. How can we help people get there? And so I think that's the need isn't the full cost of the project, because I know that there's going to be some local help, but there may be, and I think to Kara's point, there may some of these smaller communities may not have any money allocated, so it may be a zero for the local right now, and they need 100% of the funds. And I think that is recommendations, kind of what Suzanne and Kara were talking about. Based on what we see in this, we can make recommendations to, hey, there are a lot of communities that don't have matching funds and we need a SWIFT program or something like that. So I think everybody is on the same track. And yes, we can put some recommendations in Task 8 based on what we find in Task 9. But again, I think Task 9 is really going to be where, that's where the rubber meets the road, right? That's where the state, when, the legislature, I think the biggest thing was is a state flood plan was needed to be put into place to find out what is the number. And I think that's where the number comes from. So
let me jump in here, because at the City of San Antonio, we've just concluded, we've been doing some projections and some discussions particular about that. And this should give you a scope of kind of put you in the ballpark, because of course, San Antonio is the largest entity within our region. So within our region, City of San Antonio has a $3.2 billion drainage need. That's $3.2 billion. From that, we said, my mother always says, you don't eat an elephant all at once. And I always asked her, you ate elephant? So we take small bites of it. So what I asked staff, and this is the analysis we did, tell me the top tier projects that really make a difference when it comes to saving property and lives and so forth. And they went in there and they did additional analysis. And we've concluded that the top tier projects total 1.3 billion within the city. So then we said, okay, given the fact that we go out and we get debt through bond, we leverage funding through our stormwater utility fee, through our fee in lieu of, and we look at our multiple funding sources as well as partnering with the county and others. What is a strategy to fund that 1.3 billion in the top tier projects? And we're estimating that it's going to take us 25 years to address those 1.2 billion of today's need. Now, of course, within 10 years, we're anticipating to increase our population by well over 1 million people. So that drainage need is going to increase. So that just gives you a scope of what we're talking about. San Antonio, 3.2 billion, 1.2 of it being the most important projects. That should kind of give us an idea of what ultimately I think Task 9 will identify.
Ron, speaking of Chapter 8 again, I'm just worried about Chapter 8 because, so if we, maybe it's an Anita question, if we don't have all of our recommendations or legislative strategies or whatever identified by the draft of August 1st, are we able to really spend some time after August 1st before the final in working on that chapter 8? Because I'm not sure we're going to know everything. Because if all these things are coming in simultaneously, 7, 8, and 9, I mean, if you don't know everything out of 9 that you're learning, you're not going to be able to make good recommendations for 8 because you don't know 9. And if it's all due on August the 1st, you're not really being able to legitimately think about that. So I'm just wondering, if we don't know everything, can we still work on chapter 8 before the final?
Yes, Suzanne, everything's been told to us that it is a draft. Of course, the community is going to get to look at the draft, so we need to make it as comprehensive as possible.
Sure.
But
no, I know.
Obviously, you know, things aren't going to be perfect. We're going to have to go back and make updates. And, you know, the Water Development Board is going to have comment. This planning group is, I'm sure, going to have additional comments once everybody gets to take a breath and actually look at it. So, yes, you know, it's a draft.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure we have some flexibility because I think we're going to learn a lot as all these things sort of converge on each other, that it's going to better inform chapter 8. Thank you.
Ron, do you have any other items for task 9 before we move forward? I'd like to remind the group that we don't have much time left today.
No, that should be it for us, Kendall. And thanks for Ludovine and Daniel for being in my place today.
Ron, prayers and good thoughts are going to you and your family. Please, you guys stay safe and order some food.
Hey, Ron, are you
Thanks,
going to
man.
grow your hair out now that you're quarantined? Are you going to grow your hair out again?
Yeah, I'm gonna, for the 2 weeks I'm here, I can promise you I won't get a haircut.
Thank you, Ron. We are running short on time. We have 15 minutes left. I do have a couple items left to go. I want to move into item number 8, and let me talk a little bit about item number 8. Derek brought up an interesting point when we were having the discussions about loving so many meetings, and we certainly do have a lot of meetings. All of us here are extremely busy. One of the reasons why we were selected is because of our expertise, and because of the expertise that we do, our employment keeps us quite busy with meetings. Recognizing that there are a few members within our committee that have dedicated not only time to come to this meeting, but also share time in going to other regions and attending their meetings. And that is extremely taxing and challenging. I want to personally thank those that are participating, that include Kara, Dave, and Suzanne, for that work. And I wanted to give an opportunity really to others to hopefully have an opportunity to take over the roles that they've been doing, because I know Kara and Suzanne, particularly, your schedules have been quite challenging and quite difficult to do that. And while you know, we are doing very good work here, it is important that we understand what's going on in those areas. So I wanted to reach out to the rest of the committee to see if there was any interest from anyone else to participate in representing Region 12 and participating in these other meetings with regions 10, 11, and 13. Kara, Dave, and Suzanne have been doing an amazing job. Not that I want to kick you ladies out or Dave want to kick you guys out, but I do want to give an opportunity to others to participate and represent us, learning what other regions are doing, and potentially being able to come back and report to there.
Well, and I'll jump in. I mean, I had sent an email to Neffy and Kendall. I cannot continue to do Region 10, which is the Lower Colorado Navidad. They've moved their meetings to Monday mornings. I have corporate officer meeting every Monday morning of my life. I cannot skip that for a liaison role. And so, you know, my question was, I need to step aside unless we don't feel like we need heavy representation. And as there are other technical things, I can participate, but I can't do the regular. They are still doing hybrids. And oftentimes the chair, the judge, Spinrath from Morton County, is the only one in the room with the team, and everyone else is remote. But that's kind of mine, is I cannot continue to do it, period, because of the time they've moved their regular meetings.
No,
to.
Karen, and please understand from our committee, really a lot of thanks to you for spending the, I know you you're very difficult to get a hold of, first of all, and then to be able to attend all those meetings has been awesome. So I want to personally thank you for that work, and I do want to extend the invitation to others.
We're done with tax, so Debbie has time. We don't spend Monday afternoon somewhere else now anymore, right?
Yeah. Well, and Neffy also, I mentioned the same thing to Kendall. They've changed the region 11 to only in person, which would require me to go all the way to Seguin and back. And not that I don't love Seguin, but it adds another hour to the front end and the back end of the meetings, which the meetings themselves are, like these. So I asked if there could be a call-in option for those that are non-voting members, and I never got a response from the coordinator there. So I had asked Doris Cooksey, because she kind of lives out that way, if she could help kind of be my alternate, and I think we got her added. Did we do that, Kendall? Because, and I don't know, Doris, if you're on the phone, but I just can't. I mean, it just adds another 2 hours to the time of the meeting because I have to physically be there in person, which was challenging for me.
No, Suzanne, and I'll repeat what I mentioned to Kara about really our thanks to you for the dedication you have been to attend and to represent our region in that. And so personally, just thank you for that, and really give an opportunity for some nominations or anybody could volunteer or be voluntold to represent in Dave. I think Dave is on the call, correct? I think, Dave, how are you feeling about continuing representing Region 12 in your meetings?
Okay, I'm good because I cheat. I got one of my colleagues at work sits on Region 13 as a committee member, so I just ask him what's going on. So I'm fantastic.
Oh, you're a smart guy, Dave. Thank you. Certainly, thank you. So you're still on the hook, Dave. You're still on the hook.
No, yeah, I don't have any good excuse to get off right now because I just say, hey, Larry, what you all talk about? And he tells me. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. That's smart. Thank you, Dave. So let's start off for Region 12. That is the Lower Colorado. Region 10, I'm sorry. Sorry. Region 10 is
Region 10 is Austin, Lower Colorado, Navidad. I mean, I could have someone that in my office do it, but then it's them doing it, telling me if we had someone else that was my from this group was my preference versus me having somebody alternate for me.
Certainly. Is there any, first of all, is there any volunteers, anybody interested to attending that, Steve Gonzalez? Is there anybody that would be interested in attending that meeting?
They meet at El Sierra's office in Austin. They're still doing a hybrid, although I've missed the last two, so I haven't gone back and looked at the technical and regular.
It's still that way. It's still hybrid. You can attend from the computer.
All right. Well, hearing none, I'm going to have to volunteer somebody. So prepare to receive a call from me.
Don't look at me. Steve Klaus volunteered me for tech committee.
Oh, that's right. That's right. And you did mention that you did ask Miss Doris. Doris, are you on the call?
Hello, I'm Summer Johnson. I had my hand raised because Doris had to drop, but I do report to her, and she wanted me to follow up on the status of that liaison role. So I believe she's still willing to do it, but I think she was waiting to hear further information or to have that confirmed whether or not it was official, or so I was asked to follow up on the status of that.
Thank you, Summer. I will coordinate with Lauren Willis and make sure that she has Doris's information.
Okay, thank you.
Kendall, is that something we need to vote on to do that? No. Okay. So yes, if we can get her on the list, then she would represent Region 12 at Region 11.
Neffy, can I make a recommendation?
Certainly.
Because I think, it's one thing for each of the regions to determine if this meeting can be hybrid or in person, but there's no reason that I can see why Water Development Board can't direct them to at least allow non-voting members to participate remotely. I mean, heck, the general public should be able to call in remotely and just listen in. So I guess that would be my request, is some guidance go out to at least, whether the formal meeting is in person or hybrid, that's maybe one topic. But for public and non-voting, why can't they just make it online?
Ditto. I totally agree. And we asked specifically for the region. And again, I think Annalisa's on the call, but because I know she's their liaison to us. And I asked, and I just don't have the opportunity to join via Zoom anymore for that meeting.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Annalisa.
and I'll say for Region 10, the prime consultant is one of our consultants and with the flip-flop, so half is the prime for Region 10. So in terms of the information, seeing presentations, communication, we're not missing anything from that one. The interesting part is the dialogue from the committee, honestly, not the material. So
Yeah, this is Annalisa. I don't know why our region 10, the Guadalupe, has been so resistant to doing any kind of hybrids, because I did request actually for the public to be able to at least listen in, and that was not accepted, but I'll ask again.
That's why I
They
think it
said
needs to
that
come
people
from
could,
Water Development Board.
yeah, they said that people could watch the recording later.
Anita, I don't know if you're still on the call, but is that something that you guys can take on and help from your end?
Could you bring up the question again?
Hey, Anita, this is Derek. The issue is that we've had, our liaisons have had challenges physically getting to other region meetings that are not doing hybrid or online. And, I guess it's one thing if the region wants to do their voting business in person, but I don't see a reason why they cannot do it. They cannot accommodate non-voting liaison members and the public online live. And I think my request through NEFI would be that Water Development Board basically force that issue, because look, Texas is a big state. People, the people on these boards are busy. They cannot physically, Suzanne just said she cannot physically drive to Seguin and cut out that additional 2 hours to make the liaison meeting. And so there's got to be some accommodation, and I don't see why it's an issue for the Water Development Board to say, hey, you've at least got to allow your non-voting members to dial in, listen in, video something. You've got to make it accessible, because it's not realistic.
Right. I don't believe we have the authority to enforce this for all the regions, since you are self-governing, but I can talk to my director and supervisor to see if we can speak to Region 10 directly, just to help out with this, because I understand Suzanne's concern.
I like to use the term strongly encourage in those types of discussions.
Right. We can use those words. I'll see what flexibility we have.
Please don't make it about me, Anita. I mean, I think the idea is, I think what Derek is saying is that there are other, Water Development Board staff may want to join a region remotely and not have to drive all the way to a particular meeting, and so that you can listen and learn, even though you're a non-voting member. There are other non-voting members that are more than just liaisons that attend these meetings or are asked to come. And I just think it's much more difficult. And I think you'd get much more participation. And we know that they have the opportunity because they had to do it during COVID. It wasn't like this is something they have to, some technology that's not available. So anyway, I think it's just it would be helpful for the non-voting members to have that opportunity. I get the voting thing. That's up to each chair to make that decision, or each group. But anyway, thank you.
Anita, if you can take that action item, please. for the purpose of time, I'm gonna cut this one short and move on to agenda item number 9, which is really an update from the regional liaisons. If there
Hey,
is any,
Neffy.
I think
I
Kara
have
has
no
already
update. I
mentioned.
have no update.
Okay.
Oh, I have an update from Guadalupe.
Yes, yeah, if there's anybody in either regions 10 or 11 that could provide an update on what the status is of that, if you could, I'll give you a minute to provide an
Okay,
update.
this is Annalisa. I'll go real quickly. So we actually were given a draft of Chapter 1 by our contractors, and everybody had the opportunity to comment on that, and then they incorporated those comments into a draft, which we approved by vote at the last meeting, and those are on the web, both the draft report and the comments. And then we discussed floodplain management practices and short and long-term goals. We had gone over those before, but we significantly revised those. It was a pretty long discussion. And then we had an interesting request from the Upper Guadalupe River Authority for our contractors to include evaluation of water and sediment control facilities as flood mitigation strategies to potentially be applied basin-wide. And that's it.
Thank you. Thank you. From Region 10?
Yes, this is Kirby Brown. I'm going to be representing Region 10 in place of Patrick Brzezowski, who also had a couple of regions, and he's had to back down on some of those, and so I volunteered for this. I will say real quickly that our June 9th meeting that's coming up of Region 10 will review and potentially approve the almost 200 FMXs that the technical committee has closely reviewed and recommended with the technical consultants, and we've been over some of those with them. We will also, at that June 9 meeting, review the drafts for Task 8, which we've already discussed, really get into detail with them on administrative, regulatory, and legislative recommendations, and Task 9 on the infrastructure financing. And those are both set to be adopted at our July meetings. So a lot of work ahead. I think you used the word crunch time. We empathize with you.
Thank you
That's
so
it.
much for those updates. Certainly really appreciate you participating and being a part of our team here. So thank you. Dave, do you have anything from Region 13?
Yeah, the last update I got on it is that they got a subcommittee. It's a regulatory subcommittee that's putting together comments for the legislature, and they're going to get a report together, and that should probably be at their next meeting. And once I see that, I'm going to send it over to you, Neffy. That way we can see if there's anything we need to maybe incorporate in some of our comments in the future. But that's all I got.
Great. Interesting information. Please share that with us when you can. Thank you. Let me move on to item number 10, which is a public comment. Kendall, is there anybody that has signed up for public comment?
No, sir, there are no public comments.
Thank you. We'll move on to item number 11, which is date and potential dates for the next meeting, outlining that October committee meets June 22nd at 2 p.m., as well as the technical committee would meet on the 23rd at 2 p.m. And then that would place the planning group to meet the week of the 27th. I don't think we have the exact date, correct, Kendall? So we would have to agree to the date right now for June, the week of June 27th. If you could please look at at your calendars.
As of noon on the 28th, I'm on vacation, so I vote for the 28th as well.
We could also meet on we could also meet Monday the 27th if that's easier. I know several people are going to be on vacation towards the end of the week for the 4th of July.
The afternoon of the 27th.
We do afternoon of the 27th.
Because
No.
of the length of this meeting, I will say it should be maybe 2 to 3 hours. So I suggest starting no later than 2. Sorry, Susan.
From those on the call, I know, yeah. From those on the call, is there any concerns with June 27th at 1:30? I'm hearing none. So if everybody's in agreement to please hold June 27th at 1:30.
And I would propose we go ahead and talk about 2 dates in July today. I mean, I think with people's vacations and trying to book things when you're not on vacation, I'd rather get them on the calendar and not need them than get to a place where we were in trouble.
I do want to clarify first. Ron, did you want the whole planning group to meet twice in July, or did you want the technical committee to meet twice in July?
Is Derek listening?
Yes, be very careful what you say next.
No, I was, unfortunately, I was making the recommendation that the technical committee meeting be 2 in July in that month, because I do know we're going to have not only the we're going to need some time to go over the report, and we're going to need some time to talk about the things like in task 7, 8, and 9. So.
Okay, to give the most time then for action to be taken at the end of June and early July, I propose we look at the weeks of July 18th and July 25th for the whole planning group meeting.
But if we're doing 2 technical committees between June 27th and July 18th, no way. That'd mean we'd be meeting 1 time each of those next 2 weeks. That's too fast, I think.
Okay, so let's look at the week of the 25th then.
And Ron, the technical committee needing to meet twice, you know, are we really all of those items technical committee and not going to have a lot of dialogue at this full committee?
We have
I mean, I'm just saying, should it be this full group that meets twice and the technical once, or can we really get through? Because a couple of our members who are going to give a lot of input aren't on that technical committee. I'm looking at 1, 2 right now. I mean, it is what it is. It's true. And that's important input. So I know you'd probably small group, but.
I mean, I'm open to it. I just know it's much harder to coordinate 2 of these meetings, post agendas and do all of that. I just don't know. I mean, could we, you
Don't
think we could
have all the
feasibly
same
do something
quorum
like,
reporting posting requirements?
do you think we can do something the week of you know, I don't necessarily say we need it back to back. So maybe something like the week of the 11th and the week of the 25th. And we put a.
Yeah, and in my mind, if we post it as the whole committee and, you know, some that are just out more focused on outreach don't want to come, okay, but those that aren't on the technical committee can come and we're not violating a quorum discussion. You know, like if Neffy and Suzanne wanted to attend what would typically be in technical, they can't because of quorum, but if we post it as the full committee, we can.
I like that. That's a good idea.
Right.
Okay.
And the work session, when we adopt the meeting.
Let's do that. So what day? What week? The week of the 11th? July 11th?
Is the work session.
After either of those days work for me, but they have to be in the afternoon. That's fine.
That's good.
I can make that.
Okay. You're coming back on 12. What time? 4:30.
Wednesday or Thursday?
Thursday works better for me. Thursday afternoon works better for me.
Yep.
Thursday, 1:30.
That's good. 14th,
14.
Work session.
1:30, 2 o'clock.
If
2
it's a
o'clock.
work session, we could probably get away with 2 hours instead of 3 if you wanted to make it 2.
It's
So 2 p.m. The moan of pain.
I know.
Okay. So this is what we have. June 22nd for the outreach. Techno will be June 23rd. I also have June 27th for this body at 1:30. And then subsequently again in July 14th as for a work session at 2 p.m. On the 25th, the week of the 25th.
25th to allow max time before the 1 August.
Okay.
Can we do July 28th, or is that too late for Ron?
The question was, is July 28th too late for you, Ron?
To get
I
to get
would
a lot
prefer
of
the 25th actually, that Monday. Yeah, the afternoon of the 25th. Can you make it the afternoon of the 25th, Kara?
Yeah.
Yeah, that works for me. Ron, would the afternoon of the 25th, would that be okay for you?
much better.
Okay, let's say 1:30 and allocate 3 hours, even if we don't use it, just to pass everything for the draft plan.
Perfect. Let's do that. All right.
1:30.
I've gone over 10 minutes, so I need to let you out. Let's go on to agenda item number 12. I think we have the dates. Kendall, if you can email us the dates. Item number 12 is
I make a
Motion to
motion
adjourn.
to adjourn.
Second.
all in favor. Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you so much.